The restaurant sat on a quiet corner of the city, glowing softly as evening settled in. Warm light spilled through tall glass windows, and inside, the sound of low conversation mixed with gentle music. It was the kind of place people chose for special nights, where the plates were carefully arranged and every detail mattered. The dinner rush had already started. Tables were filling fast, and the staff moved with practiced speed. Among them was a young waitress who had worked there for over a year. She knew the menu by heart and could tell what guests wanted before they even asked. Tonight, like most nights, she tied her hair back neatly, took a deep breath, and reminded herself to stay calm no matter what happened. Busy nights always tested patience, but she took pride in her work. Near the entrance, a black luxury car pulled up. A well-dressed man stepped out first. His posture was confident, and his movements were slow and controlled, the kind that came from years of being in charge. People in business circles knew him as a powerful CA, someone who made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. With him was his girlfriend, dressed in a sleek outfit that drew attention the moment she walked inside. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, cutting through the soft music. As they entered, the host greeted them politely and checked the reservation. The girlfriend barely glanced at him. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the decor, the other diners, and the way heads turned toward them. She liked being noticed. It made her feel important. They were led to a table near the center of the restaurant. It was a good spot with a clear view of the room. The CEO pulled out a chair for her, but she sat down without acknowledging the gesture. He smiled slightly, used to this kind of response, and took his seat across from her. The waitress was assigned to their table. She approached with a friendly smile, holding 2 menus. Her voice was calm as she welcomed them and explained the specials of the night. She asked if they would like water or something else to drink. The CEO nodded and thanked her. The girlfriend, however, barely listened. She was already looking around, checking her phone, tapping her fingers on the table. As the waitress walked away to get their drinks, the girlfriend leaned back in her chair and sighed loudly. She complained about the traffic, the wait at the entrance, and how long everything seemed to take. The CEO listened quietly, offering short replies. He had spent the day in meetings and was hoping for a peaceful dinner, but he knew better than to argue. Around them, other diners were enjoying their meals. A couple at a nearby table laughed softly. A group of coworkers toasted to a promotion. The restaurant felt alive, but not loud. It was meant to be comfortable, a place where people could relax. The waitress returned with water and placed the glasses carefully on the table. She asked if they were ready to order or needed more time. The CEO said they needed a few minutes. The girlfriend frowned and asked why the menu was so limited. The waitress explained gently that the restaurant focused on fresh, seasonal dishes. The girlfriend rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. The waitress remained polite. She had dealt with difficult customers before. She nodded, smiled, and stepped away to give them time. As she walked toward another table, she reminded herself not to take it personally. Some people just came in with bad moods. The girlfriend continued to complain. She talked about other restaurants she preferred, places where people knew who she was and treated her better. She mentioned how expensive the city had become and how service everywhere seemed to be getting worse. The CEO glanced around, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. He hoped the food would arrive quickly and smooth things over. In the kitchen, orders piled up. The staff worked hard, calling out instructions, moving plates, checking tickets. The owner of the restaurant was also present that night, though he stayed mostly in the back, keeping an eye on things. He believed in letting his team handle the floor, trusting them to do their jobs well. When the waitress returned to take their order, the girlfriend snapped that they had been waiting too long, even though only a few minutes had passed. The waitress apologized and asked for their order again. The CEO ordered calmly. The girlfriend changed her mind twice, asking questions about ingredients and portion sizes. Her tone sharp and impatient. The waitress wrote everything down carefully, repeating the order to make sure it was correct. She thanked them and headed back to the kitchen. As she walked away, she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came from being spoken to harshly. Still, she kept her shoulders straight. She had learned that staying professional was the best defense. Time passed. The restaurant grew fuller. The noise level rose slightly, but the mood remained pleasant. At the CEO's table, the girlfriend checked her phone repeatedly, sighing each time she looked up. She complained about how hungry she was and how slow the service felt. The CEO tried to distract her with small talk, but she brushed him off. When the waitress passed by their table on her way to another guest, the girlfriend called out to her sharply. The waitress stopped immediately and turned, ready to help. The girlfriend asked where their food was, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The waitress explained that the kitchen was busy, but their order would be out soon. She spoke calmly, even though she could feel eyes on her. The girlfriend shook her head in disbelief and muttered that this place was overrated. A few diners nearby exchanged glances. The CEO shifted in his seat, clearly embarrassed now. He apologized quietly to the waitress, but the girlfriend didn't notice or didn't care. The waitress walked away again, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath near the service station and reminded herself to focus. She had bills to pay and a job she cared about. One difficult table would not ruin her night out as she waited for the food to be ready. She thought about how different people could be. Some guests treated her like she didn't exist. Others thanked her sincerely for the smallest things. She never knew which kind she would face when she approached the table dot at the CEO's table. The girlfriend leaned forward, her patience nearly gone. She whispered sharply to him that if the food wasn't perfect, she would make sure someone heard about it. He nodded slowly, his expression tight. He was starting to regret choosing this restaurant, not because of the food or service, but because of the growing tension. The plates were almost ready. The waitress watched as the chef added final touches, making sure everything looked just right. She picked up the tray carefully, checked the ticket once more, and prepared to deliver the dishes. She had no idea that the waitress carried the tray carefully, making her way to the table in the center of the room. She balanced each plate so nothing would tip over, and as she approached, she reminded herself to stay calm. She had handled difficult customers before, and she could handle this one too. Her mind focused on the details, making sure the food looked perfect. The drinks were in the right place, everything neat and cleaned out as she set the plates down. The CEO nodded and thanked her politely. She smiled and moved on to pour water into the glasses. It was a small, normal interaction, the kind that happened hundreds of times every day in restaurants. She didn't expect anything unusual, but the girlfriend, sitting across the table, had other plans. She leaned forward abruptly, her voice sharp and loud enough to draw attention from the nearby diners. She complained that one of the dishes didn't look like it was supposed to, though it matched the description on the menu perfectly. She waved her hand at the plate, pointing, her tone more demanding than questioning. The waitress froze for a split second, then recovered. She explained politely, keeping her voice calm, that the dish was made exactly as the chef had prepared it, fresh and according to the recipe. The girlfriend's lips pressed into a tight line. She shook her head in disbelief, muttering that this was unacceptable. A few diners nearby glanced over, sensing the tension building. Some whispered quietly to each other, their curiosity mixing with discomfort. Nobody liked seeing arguments in a place meant for enjoyment. But the scene was unfolding right in front of them. The waitress stepped back slightly, trying to give the guests space while still being attentive. She felt her heartbeat speed up, but she refused to show it. She had learned long ago that maintaining composure was the best defense in situations like this. The restaurant felt suddenly smaller, as if the air had thickened around the table. Then, without warning, the girlfriend reached out and slapped the waitress across the cheek. The sound of the slap was sharp and unmistakable. The entire restaurant seemed to pause for a moment. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered in mid-air. Even the music seemed to fade. The waitress stood there, stunned, her hand instinctively coming up to her cheek. She could feel heat rising to her face, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and disbelief. Time seemed to slow. The waitress tried to speak, to say something, but no words came out. Her eyes met the girlfriend's, searching for any sign of apology, any understanding, but there was none. Only anger and impatience filled the space between them. The CEO, sitting across from her girlfriend, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His jaw tightened. He had seen this side of her before, but never in such a public way. He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. Nearby diners were frozen, unsure if they should intervene or stay out of it. Some discreetly reached for their phones, perhaps thinking of calling security or recording the incident. A couple of servers hesitated, unsure if they should step in, while the kitchen staff paused in their work, their eyes drawn to the commotion. The waitress, taking a deep breath, forced herself to remain standing. She remembered her training stay professional, no matter what. She nodded slightly to indicate she was okay, though her hand still lingered on her cheek. She felt a tightness in her chest, a mix of fear and frustration. She had never imagined being treated this way while doing her job. The girlfriend leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, satisfied for the moment that she had made a point. She didn't notice the looks of judgment coming from other tables. She didn't care about the whispers or the stares. For her, the world revolved around her expectations being met immediately. The CEO finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. He told his girlfriend to calm down, to leave the waitress alone. His words were measured, careful, trying not to escalate the situation further. The girlfriend rolled her eyes and ignored him, clearly thinking that her status made her untouchable dot at that moment. The restaurant owner appeared. He had been in the back, keeping an eye on the evening's operations, and had noticed the disturbance. His steps were calm but purposeful as he approached the table. There was a confidence in the way he moved, not aggressive, but commanding attention. Naturally, the owner reached the table, his eyes fixed on the girlfriend. Instead of yelling or immediately confronting her, he turned his attention to the waitress. His voice was soft, warm, and full of care. "Honey, you okay?" he asked. The words carried a weight that made the room shift subtly. The girlfriend froze, her anger faltering for just a second. It became clear, in that single moment, that the waitress was not just an employee. The bond between them was obvious. There was concern, protectiveness, and an underlying closeness that made the girlfriend realize her mistake. She had assumed she could behave however she wanted, but this dynamic was entirely different. The waitress blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in energy. She felt relief at the owner's support, but also a surge of embarrassment. All the attention of the room had turned toward her, and though she knew she had done nothing wrong, the incident had exposed her to public scrutiny. She steadied herself, focusing on the owner's calm presence, which made her feel supported and safe. The girlfriend's face changed slightly. The realization of what she had done began to sink in. She had slapped someone who had personal protection and care right there in the restaurant. Her anger dimmed, replaced by a flicker of fear and regret. She glanced at the CEO, hoping for rescue, but he sat silently, clearly disappointed. Other diners murmured among themselves, some expressing quiet approval of the owner's response. A few whispered about how brave the waitress had been, standing up to such an outrageous display. The atmosphere of the restaurant shifted again, but this time in favor of calm and support rather than tension. The girlfriend tried to speak, but the words seemed to fail her. The owner, still standing nearby, kept his focus on the waitress, ensuring she was unharmed and composed. "Take a moment," he said gently. "You're okay." For the first time that evening, the waitress allowed herself to exhale fully. Her hands dropped to her sides, her heart slowing. She realized that while the situation had been shocking, she had not been alone. There were people in the room willing to support her, even if the confrontation had initially seemed impossible to handle. The CEO finally cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. He addressed the girlfriend, his tone calm but unmistakably serious. "This is not acceptable," he said. "We need to leave, now." The girlfriend hesitated, her pride wounded. She had not expected anyone to challenge her behavior so directly. The owner's simple question to the waitress had completely flipped the power dynamic in the room. The girlfriend's face flushed with embarrassment, and she opened her mouth, unsure what to say. No excuses seemed to come out right. The staff around them quietly observed, ready to assist if needed. The manager moved subtly closer, prepared to guide the guests out without further conflict. Meanwhile, the other diners returned to their meals, though some still kept their eyes on the unfolding scene, curiosity mixing with relief that the situation was under control. The waitress straightened, looking at the owner with gratitude. She nodded once, a small gesture of thanks. He nodded back, silently communicating that she had done nothing wrong. The energy in the restaurant slowly began to return to normal, though the tension lingered near the CEO's table. The girlfriend finally stood, brushing off her coat and muttering something inaudible. The CEO rose as well, casting one last apologetic glance at the waitress. She nodded, keeping her professionalism intact, even though her cheeks were still warm from the incident. As they made their way toward the exit, the owner watched carefully. He did not raise his voice. He did not scold loudly. He simply ensured the situation ended without further escalation. His presence had been enough to shift the mood, turning what could have been a humiliating disaster into a moment of quiet authority and protection. After they left, the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The staff exchanged glances, relieved that the crisis was over. The other diners returned to their conversations, many quietly praising the waitress for her composure. The owner returned to his duties, checking on tables, ensuring nothing had been disrupted further. The waitress took a moment near the counter, her hands still slightly trembling. She thought about how quickly things had escalated, how a single slap had changed the evening entirely. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay grounded. She had handled it. She had remained professional. And most importantly, she had been supported when it mattered. The memory of the owner's words stayed with her. "Honey, you okay?" It was simple, kind, and protective. It reminded her that in a world that could sometimes be harsh, there were people who cared, who stood up for her without needing to shout or demand attention. And so, as the night continued, she returned to her work with renewed focus. The incident had shaken her, yes, but it had also shown her strength, the importance of composure, and the value of having someone trustworthy in your corner. She moved from table to table, serving with the same care and attention as before, knowing that despite what had happened, she had handled herself with dignity. This simple walk back to the table would change the entire night for everyone involved. The restaurant had slowly settled back into its rhythm, but the tension near the center table still lingered like a faint shadow. The waitress had returned to her duties, moving carefully from table to table, serving drinks and clearing plates, her movements calm and controlled. She felt the lingering heat on her cheek from the slap, though the owner's presence had given her a sense of safety. She focused on her work, pouring water for a couple at a nearby table and checking on their dessert order, trying to remind herself that most nights were much calmer. The girlfriend had been escorted out quietly, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she followed the CEO. The manager had handled the situation tactfully, keeping other diners from becoming too involved, while ensuring the couple left without causing more disturbance. The room gradually returned to a more relaxed pace, the soft hum of conversation and cutlery filling the air once again. But for the waitress, the incident replayed over and over in her mind. She had never experienced anything like it in her life. People were supposed to be polite in restaurants, especially in places like this. She could deal with impatience, complaints, or even rude remarks, but physical aggression was entirely different. She wiped her hands on her apron and tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she had handled the situation as best she could. She had remained professional, and that mattered. From the kitchen, she could see the owner moving between tables, speaking softly to staff and checking on diners. His calm and deliberate presence was reassuring, like a shield around the restaurant. When he looked at her, she felt a small sense of relief. He didn't need to speak loudly or make a scene to assert authority. The way he carried himself was enough. That simple question he had asked, "Honey, you okay?" still echoed in her mind. There was something so genuine in it, so caring, that it made her realize she was not alone in handling the aftermath. The CEO, meanwhile, had taken a seat near the entrance, waiting for the manager to ensure the rest of the night would pass smoothly. His girlfriend remained silent beside him, her pride bruised but not fully humbled. He observed her quietly, trying to think of a way to discuss the incident without making the situation worse. His mind raced, replaying what had happened, analyzing how quickly one moment of anger could spiral into a public scene. Back on the floor, the waitress moved toward a table where a group of friends had gathered for a small celebration. She greeted them with her usual smile, careful to appear composed despite the lingering tension. She took their drink orders and reassured them that their food would be out shortly. As she left, one of the diners whispered a quiet compliment to her, commenting on how calm and professional she had been despite the earlier commotion. She felt a small warmth in her chest at their words, grateful that someone recognized her effort. Yet every time she passed the central table, her mind couldn't help but glance toward the empty seats where the couple had been. The energy in that area had shifted noticeably after the incident. The other diners who had witnessed the slap were still subtly watching, exchanging glances and whispers. Some appeared curious, others sympathetic, but everyone seemed to feel the weight of what had just happened. The waitress felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She had endured something shocking, yet she had not let it break her composure. In the kitchen, the chef noticed her brief pauses and subtle tension. He called her over for a moment and handed her a small plate of food, meant as a quiet encouragement. "Take a bite. Calm down for a second," he said gently. She smiled faintly, accepting the gesture with a nod. The small act of kindness reminded her that support came in many forms, not just from the owner, but from coworkers who understood the pressures of the night. As the evening continued, a few challenges arose with other tables, but nothing like what had happened before. Guests asked questions, made special requests, and occasionally expressed dissatisfaction, but the waitress handled each situation with her usual care. She noticed that her confidence had grown slightly after the earlier confrontation. She had faced something intense and come out intact. There was a quiet strength in that realization. Meanwhile, the CEO and his girlfriend were still near the entrance, preparing to leave. The manager approached them quietly, speaking softly to remind them of any pending bills and to ensure the departure would be smooth. The girlfriend avoided eye contact with anyone, her expression tense. She shifted uncomfortably under the subtle judgment of staff and the occasional glance from diners. Pride and embarrassment warred within her, and for the first time that night, she seemed unsure of how to act. The waitress noticed them leaving. She had been trained not to show any visible reaction, but she felt a quiet sense of closure as the couple moved toward the door. Their exit signaled the end of one chapter of the evening, yet the memory of the slap and the public scene lingered in her mind. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong, and that the support of the owner and her colleagues had helped her navigate the situation. Later in the night, after the restaurant had quieted significantly, the owner came over to speak with her privately. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and asked if she was truly okay. She nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos earlier in the evening, and it reminded her that authority and care could be exercised without anger or aggression. The owner asked her about the sequence of events, not to criticize, but to understand what had happened and how they could prevent similar incidents in the future. She explained calmly, recounting the girlfriend's impatience and sudden aggression. The owner listened intently, nodding occasionally and offering small reassurances. It was clear that he valued her not just as an employee, but as a person. His words were a reminder that respect and human connection mattered. Above all else, the waitress felt a sense of relief washing over her. Despite the shock and embarrassment earlier, she now understood that the owner had her back. That simple reassurance made a world of difference. She thought about how different the night could have gone if she had been left alone to deal with the incident. Instead, she had guidance, support, and a quiet authority to lean on. She returned to the floor once again, feeling slightly more at ease. The remaining diners were finishing their meals, chatting softly and occasionally smiling at the attentive service. She moved between tables, refilling drinks and checking on desserts. Her movements were calm and assured, as if the earlier tension had reinforced her professionalism rather than broken it. As she worked, she reflected on how unpredictable people could be. Some guests arrived with smiles and laughter, while others carried frustration and impatience with them. She realized that in her line of work, staying composed and understanding the human side of every interaction was essential. The slap from the girlfriend had been shocking, yes, but it had also highlighted her own resilience and ability to maintain dignity under pressure. The owner continued to move around the restaurant, occasionally glancing her way. She felt a quiet sense of pride, knowing that he recognized her efforts, that he trusted her to handle situations with care and professionalism. She understood that the night had been a test in many ways, not just of skill, but of patience and emotional strength. By the time the last guests were finishing their meals, the waitress had regained a sense of normalcy. Plates were cleared, glasses refilled, and smiles exchanged. The evening had started with energy and expectation, escalated into tension and surprise, and then settled back into the calm rhythm that defined the restaurant. She realized that in every night, no matter how chaotic or challenging, there was an opportunity to demonstrate strength, kindness, and professionalism. As the restaurant prepared to close, she paused to take a deep breath. The lights dimmed slightly, the soft music continued, and the staff began their end-of-day routines. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had handled a difficult situation with composure and grace. The memory of the slap lingered, but it no longer had the power to shake her. Instead, it served as a reminder of her own resilience and the importance of support from those who cared. She walked toward the service, stationed one last time that night, collecting trays and organizing the area for closing. The staff exchanged tired but content smiles. The owner approached once more, giving her a small nod of approval. She returned it, feeling the weight of the evening lift slightly from her shoulders. The events of the night would remain in her memory, a reminder of how quickly moments could change and how strength often came from calmness and professionalism. She understood now more than ever that while people could act unpredictably, dignity, patience, and support were constants she could rely on. And with that thought, she continued her work, ready to face whatever challenges might come next. Stronger and wiser than before, the restaurant had finally settled into a quiet rhythm after the earlier confrontation. Most of the diners had returned to their meals, enjoying their evening without incident. The waitress continued moving gracefully between tables, her mind focused on her work, but still carrying the memory of what had happened. She was calm, but the adrenaline from the previous moments lingered slightly in her chest. The owner moved quietly behind her, observing the floor. He had always believed in leading by example, not through loud authority, but through presence and careful attention. He noticed her subtle tension and approached her once more, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said quietly. There was no exaggeration, no dramatics, just honest appreciation. She nodded, grateful for his support. Meanwhile, the CEO and his girlfriend had stepped outside. The cool night air met them as they exited through the door. The city lights reflected off nearby buildings, casting a warm glow on the sidewalk. The girlfriend was silent, her earlier anger now replaced by an uneasy discomfort. She had not expected the owner to intervene so decisively. She had assumed that her status and her companion's influence would allow her to act without consequence. But the reality had proven otherwise. The CEO, though visibly frustrated, remained composed. He placed a hand on her arm and spoke in a low, firm tone. "That behavior wasn't acceptable," he said. She flinched slightly at the firmness in his voice, realizing that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. She tried to respond, but words failed her. The energy she had carried inside the restaurant, the pride, the arrogance, had shifted into quiet shame. Back inside, the owner returned to the floor. But his focus wasn't just on the staff, it was also on the atmosphere of the room. He moved between tables, checking that every diner was satisfied, making sure the staff remained confident. His presence alone seemed to calm the subtle tension that still lingered in the air. When he reached the table the couple had occupied earlier, he briefly glanced toward the door, noting that the situation had been resolved without further escalation. He returned to the staff, speaking quietly to reassure them that they had handled the situation well. The waitress continued her work, pouring drinks and taking orders. She could feel the staff watching her, perhaps expecting a sign of weakness after what had occurred. But she felt strong, reinforced by the owner's calm support. Each time she moved past the central area, she reminded herself of the owner's simple words, "Honey, you okay?" There was a protection and authority in that question that shifted the balance entirely. The girlfriend, standing outside, leaned against the car. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She was quiet now, her usual boldness replaced with reflection. The realization of what had happened, how quickly a single moment of anger had spiraled into embarrassment and public exposure, was beginning to sink in. She glanced at the CEO, hoping for a comforting response, but he maintained his composed and slightly disappointed expression. Inside the restaurant, the staff slowly began to relax. Some of the newer employees whispered quietly to each other, commenting on how tense the earlier moments had been. Others nodded respectfully toward the waitress, recognizing her composure. The owner moved among them, offering quiet guidance and reassurance. His calm demeanor reinforced the idea that authority didn't need to shout to be effective. The way he handled the situation became a subtle lesson for everyone present. Respect and human care could exert far more power than anger or intimidation. The waitress moved toward a table with a family of 4. She smiled warmly as she placed their drinks and took their order. Though she was still aware of what had happened earlier, her professionalism remained intact. She noticed that the family looked relaxed, perhaps sensing that the energy of the restaurant had shifted back to a pleasant, safe environment. The contrast between the earlier tension and the current calm reminded her how quickly situations could change, depending on how people chose to respond. Meanwhile, the CEO's girlfriend remained outside, leaning against the car and replaying the scene over and over in her mind. She thought about the slap, the public attention, and most of all, the owner's calm but commanding intervention. The simple question he had asked, the one addressed to the waitress, had completely shifted the energy. She realized that she had underestimated the power of kindness paired with authority. Her anger had been met with patience, support, and a quiet strength that left her powerless to continue her display of control. The CEO stood beside her, silent, watching the street. He understood her discomfort and shame, but he also knew that this was a moment for reflection, not confrontation. He had learned about her character in a way that words alone could not convey. The incident had revealed traits that would be impossible to ignore: impulsiveness, a desire for attention, and a lack of patience in public spaces. It was a moment that would not be forgotten easily. Inside, the owner returned once again to the waitress. He asked if she needed a moment to rest or to step away from the floor. She shook her head politely but gratefully. "I'm fine," she said, smiling lightly. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to the floor, checking on other tables. The subtle ways he maintained authority impressed her, the calm observation, the gentle words. The small gestures of care, all of it combined to create an environment where respect was clear and expectations were met without harshness. The evening continued, each passing moment reinforcing lessons learned. The staff remained professional, aware that a single incident could have disrupted the entire flow of the night. The diners, sensing the restored balance, relaxed and continued their meals without concern. The energy shifted from tension back to calm, demonstrating how quickly a situation could be corrected with composure and care. The girlfriend's reflection outside grew deeper as the minutes passed. She began to understand the weight of accountability. Actions carried consequences, especially when they were public. A single choice to act aggressively had exposed her to judgment and had reminded her that respect could not be demanded through status or intimidation. The memory of the owner's question lingered in her mind, a quiet reminder that care and authority often spoke louder than anger. The CEO noticed her introspection and decided to remain silent. Sometimes words only complicated things. Instead, he allowed her the space to process the experience. He understood that her regret, if genuine, would only be meaningful if she recognized it herself. He stayed patient, giving her the room to reflect on the consequences of her behavior and the impact it had on others. Back on the floor, the waitress finished serving a table and returned to clear dishes from another. She felt a quiet pride in herself for having maintained composure despite the incident. She noticed the staff watching and understood that they were learning from her example. The ability to stay calm in the face of aggression, to continue performing her duties with professionalism, was a lesson in resilience. The owner passed by once more, offering a brief word of encouragement. "You did well tonight," he said softly. She nodded again, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The earlier chaos had been challenging, but it had also shown her strength she hadn't fully recognized before. She realized that while people could act unpredictably, support, composure, and confidence could help navigate even the most uncomfortable situations. Outside, the girlfriend finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "I shouldn't have done that," she admitted, almost to herself. The CEO turned to look at her, noting the sincerity in her tone. It was a small step, but a significant one. Recognition of mistakes, especially in moments of public embarrassment, was rarely easy. Her words reflected an awareness that consequences existed for actions, and that respect and patience were essential in human interactions. Inside the restaurant, the last tables were finishing their meals. The staff worked efficiently, clearing dishes, refilling drinks, and preparing for closing. The waitress moved from table to table, her confidence reinforced by the events of the evening. The owner's support and the CEO's quiet intervention had shown her that strength came not just from handling tasks, but from maintaining composure and relying on others when necessary. The girlfriend remained reflective, the weight of the evening slowly settling upon her. She thought about the lessons in humility, patience, and accountability that the night had forced upon her. The experience had been uncomfortable, yes, but it had also been illuminating. She realized that behavior in public spaces affected not only herself, but those around her, and that respect could not be demanded, it had to be shown and earned. Meanwhile, the waitress finished her final duties, organizing the floor for closing and ensuring that everything was in order. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The night had been unexpectedly difficult, yet she had emerged with dignity intact. She understood that the experience had tested more than her skill. It had tested her patience, her composure, and her ability to navigate human emotions under pressure. As the lights dimmed and the music softened for the last time that evening, the restaurant staff exchanged small smiles. They had weathered a storm that could have disrupted the entire night, and they had done so with professionalism and care. The waitress stood quietly for a moment, reflecting on how unpredictable human behavior could be, and how calmness, authority, and kindness could turn even a tense situation into a moment of learning and growth. The owner walked past her one last time, offering a brief nod of respect. It was enough to remind her that guidance and support often came quietly but had a lasting impact. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the evening settle. The incident with the CEO's girlfriend had been traumatic and shocking, but it had also revealed the strength of human character, the ability to remain composed, to support one another, and to find dignity even in challenging moments. The restaurant had finally settled into the quiet rhythm of closing time. Most of the diners had gone home, leaving only the staff and a few stragglers finishing their meals. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the gentle clatter of dishes being cleared filled the space. For the waitress, the night had been long and exhausting, but she moved through the tasks with steady hands and a calm mind. Each motion, from stacking plates to wiping tables, reminded her that she had made it through a night that could have easily overwhelmed anyone. The owner walked among the staff one last time, his calm presence grounding the room. He spoke quietly to each person, offering small words of encouragement and reassurance. "You handled everything well tonight," he told the waitress, his tone sincere. She smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. His support had been steady all evening, and it reminded her of the quiet strength that leadership could bring not by force or anger, but by patience and understanding. The girlfriend of the CEO had left some time ago, but the impact of her actions lingered in the minds of the staff. The incident had been shocking, yes, but it had also become a learning moment. The waitress reflected on how quickly a single action could ripple through a room, affecting not just those involved, but everyone who witnessed it. Her own calm had helped, but so had the owner's intervention. The combination of support, professionalism, and authority had turned what could have been a disaster into a manageable situation. In the office near the back of the restaurant, the CEO had made a phone call to ensure that the bill for the night was settled. His voice was measured and calm, the kind of tone that commanded attention without aggression. He knew that the girlfriend's behavior had been inappropriate, and that addressing it privately was the only way to prevent further issues. He reflected on what had happened, considering how quickly pride and impatience could escalate into public embarrassment. Meanwhile, the girlfriend sat in the car, the weight of the night pressing down on her. She replayed the scene repeatedly in her mind: the slap, the owner's calm intervention, the look of support on the waitress's face. A sense of regret had settled in, growing stronger with every passing minute. She realized that her impulsive behavior had not only embarrassed herself, but had also shown a lack of respect for someone who was simply doing their job. For the first time that night, she felt the sting of accountability inside the restaurant. The waitress finished clearing the last of the dishes and placed them neatly in the dishwashing area. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath and feeling a quiet pride in herself. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, replaced by a reflective calm. She thought about how resilience often came from unexpected places, support from colleagues, a steady hand from a leader, and the ability to stay composed in moments of chaos. The owner approached her once more, this time holding a small notepad. He had written a few notes about the night, not as a reprimand, but as a record to help the staff learn and grow. "It's important to recognize how quickly situations can escalate," he said gently. "Tonight, you handled yourself with professionalism. Remember that composure can change outcomes, even in the most challenging moments." The waitress nodded, absorbing the wisdom in his words. She realized that while the incident had been uncomfortable, it had also been a moment of growth, a test of her patience and resilience. Back outside, the CEO finally addressed the girlfriend directly. His tone was calm but serious. "You need to reflect on what happened," he said. "It's not just about this restaurant. It's about understanding how your actions affect others and taking responsibility for them." She listened quietly, her pride still bruised, but a flicker of understanding in her eyes. The incident had forced her to confront aspects of herself that she had previously ignored: impulsiveness, impatience, and a lack of respect for others' efforts. Inside the restaurant, the waitress moved to collect the last trays and utensils from a table where a family had been finishing their meal. They thanked her warmly for her attentive service, and she smiled back, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The positive moments of the evening reminded her that for every challenge, there were countless small victories, moments of genuine connection, appreciation, and human kindness that balanced out the difficult moments. The girlfriend, still in the car, reflected on the lessons of the evening. She understood now that authority and status could not substitute for respect, patience, or humility. She replayed the owner's calm intervention in her mind and realized that his quiet, protective approach had completely shifted the situation. The memory of the waitress, standing with composure, supported yet unshaken, served as a mirror for the behavior she wished she had shown. The CEO placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of both guidance and patience. "Acknowledging mistakes is important," he said. "It's the first step toward making better choices in the future." She nodded, a silent promise forming within her to consider her actions more carefully. The night had been uncomfortable, yes, but it had also been instructive, a lesson in humility, restraint, and respect. Back in the restaurant, the staff began preparing for closing. Chairs were stacked, tables wiped, and floors swept. The waitress moved efficiently, her movements steady and purposeful. She noticed the subtle glances of her colleagues, a silent acknowledgement of her composure during the earlier incident. She realized that her professionalism had left a lasting impression, not just on the diners, but on the people she worked alongside. The owner checked the final details of the evening, ensuring that everything was in order. He spoke quietly to the staff about the importance of maintaining composure in all situations, reminding them that challenges were opportunities to demonstrate character. The lessons of the night had been clear: support, patience, and authority exercised with care could turn potentially chaotic moments into examples of strength and dignity. As the last lights dimmed and the restaurant prepared to close its doors. The waitress took a moment to reflect. The events of the night had tested her in ways she had not anticipated. She had faced aggression, witnessed tension, and managed the pressure with professionalism. She realized that resilience was not about avoiding difficult moments, but about navigating them with composure, grace, and support from those around her. The girlfriend, sitting quietly beside the CEO, finally broke the silence. "I understand now," she said softly, her voice tinged with sincerity. "I need to be more mindful of how I treat others." The CEO nodded, acknowledging her reflection. The evening had been a lesson in more than just etiquette. It had been a demonstration of the consequences of actions, the importance of empathy, and the strength of calm authority. Back on the floor, the waitress finished her last tasks and stood for a moment, looking around the restaurant. She felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. The night had been challenging, but it had also been a moment of growth for her, for the staff, and even for the guests who had witnessed the events. She understood now that every interaction, no matter how small, carried weight, and that maintaining composure and respect could change outcomes profoundly. The owner approached her one final time before leaving. "Good work tonight," he said softly, a warm smile on his face. She nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. The evening had tested her patience, her professionalism, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. She had emerged stronger, more aware, and more confident in her ability to handle whatever came her way. Outside, the CEO and his girlfriend prepared to leave. The lessons of the evening lingered in both of their minds. She had experienced firsthand the consequences of impulsive behavior and the power of calm, measured intervention. He had observed the impact of accountability and reflection. Together, the events of the night had become a moment of growth for all involved, leaving a lasting impression that would not be forgotten easily. The waitress turned off the last lights, locking the doors behind her as she stepped outside into the cool night air. She breathed deeply, feeling a sense of closure and accomplishment. The night had been long and challenging, but she had faced it with dignity and composure. She understood now that resilience was not just about handling tasks efficiently. It was about maintaining integrity, patience, and empathy in the face of unexpected challenges. The city lights reflected on the streets, and a quiet calm settled over the neighborhood. The lessons of the evening lingered not as a story of conflict, but as a demonstration of human strength, care, and accountability. The waitress walked home, her steps steady, her mind clear, and her heart lighter. She had faced an intense situation, endured it with grace, and emerged stronger on the other side. In the days that followed, the restaurant staff would occasionally recount the events of that night, not to shame anyone, but to remember the lessons learned. The owner's calm authority, the waitress's professionalism, and even the CEO and girlfriend's reflection on their actions became points of discussion and learning. It was a reminder that even the most uncomfortable moments could teach something valuable about patience, respect, and human connection. For the waitress, the night remained a defining experience. She had been tested in ways she had never imagined, and she had emerged with a renewed sense of confidence. The support she had received, the composure she had maintained, and the quiet lessons she had observed all combined to leave her stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. And so, as the city quieted and the stars began to shine above, the events of the night settled into memory, a story of confrontation, reflection, and growth. Each person involved carried a piece of that evening with them, lessons about respect, accountability, composure, and the quiet but powerful impact of human care. The night had ended, but its influence would remain, shaping actions and decisions for the days to come.